back sight, and it's also called slang a plus sight. Why is a back sight called a plus sight? Because you add the back sight. And then we have a column for HI, what's that? The height of instrument, but it's really the level to the datum. And then the next column is the foresight, and it's also called a minus sight. Why? Because you subtract it. And then we have the elevation. So looking at these numbers up here, what do we first know when we get to a job site? We know the elevation of the benchmark. We need to know 107.34. Okay? So we set up our equipment between the benchmark and what? The turning point 1, and what's your first measurement?
Oh, the Roger.
Try again. The backside, which is
Oh, okay.
7.25, right? So if you get the elevation of 107.34, and then you get a backside of 7.25, what do you do with those two numbers? You add them, and what do they become? The height of instrument. So wait, don't write it down yet, because I want to set it up. I have the numbers here, so I don't have to keep doing the calculator. So it's 114.59. Look at where I'm writing it. 114.59. While our equipment is set up on that point, so what am I also measuring? The foresight at TP1, right? Because here's our setup one. We took a back sight on benchmark 1, and then we took a foresight on turning point 1. So doesn't this represent the numbers we measure or calculate in setup 1? Is everybody comfortable with that? And then so once I get the 114.59, what do I do with this? What? Subtract it. So what do I get? I get 113.52. And what number is that?
That's the elevation of turning point
It's
1.
the elevation of turning point 1. So does it make sense that it's on the line of TP1? Right? Just like this was the elevation of the benchmark. So what do I do now that I have this elevation of TP1? What do I do with it?
You add it to the 966.
Right, I add it to the 966 because this is the back side of the turning point 1. And what do I get? Add these two numbers, I get 8, 1, 13, 123.18? Yeah. And what does these three numbers represent?
Set up 2.
I set up 2. Does that make sense? And I suggest when you do leveling, you do the same thing that I do, that you skip a line. Skip a line between each of these numbers. Because if you don't skip a line, you have to figure out where you're putting your height of instrument. Are you going to put it on the BM1 line, or are you going to put it on the TP1 row? I think it's better to do it in between, because this height of instrument belongs to both those guys. Okay, so we have the height of instrument of the second setup of 123.18. We have a foresight of 0.48, and what do?
Subtract it.
Subtract them, and I get 122.70. And what is that value?
Elevation of
The elevation of TP2. so it's on the same row. Now what do I do? I have the 122.70,
Add it to 8.
add it to 809, and this represents setup 3. And when I add them together, I get 130.79, 130.79, and then with the 130.79, what do? I subtract the 1070 and I get 120.09. And what does that equal to, Rushu? The elevation of benchmark 2.
And that should be known, so it should be easy to compare.
That's right. And then if there is a difference, you have to figure out what the difference is. And then you have to decide in how many feet, like Z mentioned, the further you are away from the 2 points, the more possibility of error. So if you look at the difference between the elevation you got and what the elevation is known of the benchmark, that error, you could divide that number over the total distance between the 2 points, benchmark 1 and benchmark